Taxes on everything, even your spare bedroom? Hi, everyone, and welcome to Ainslie Insights, brought to you by ainslie.com.au, the home of Ainslie Bullion, Ainslie Crypto, Ainslie Wealth, and the Gold and Silver Standard. Be sure to have a look. Today, we welcome back Katrina. She's been talking to me about this in the office. Like, it's insane. What is going on here? How are you going today, Katrina?
I'm very well, thanks, Chris. I'm just very excited to discuss these proposed tax measures. I mean, I can't stop talking about it in the office. I think everyone's had enough of me chatting about it today, but it's just a bit ridiculous. So I'm so happy that we can chat about it this afternoon and sort of go through key features of it and sort of what we're looking at.
Look, because I have to admit, I haven't been paying enough attention to this, and you're bringing some of the things that were discussed up. It just blows my mind. Let's start off
Yeah.
with the big one there, a
Yeah.
spare bedroom tax. What is going on here?
It's actually so bizarre. So obviously, the government has been talking about new ways to bring in revenue, and one of them is a spare bedroom tax. This is also apparently to solve the housing crisis that we have. I find this, I was reading it, Chris, and I just could not stop giggling. I thought, oh my goodness, this is actually not real. But anyway, it is a proposed tax measure, and it's on all homeowners with unused bedrooms. So there was a study that came out that said 60% of homeowners had an unused bedroom that wasn't being used. So the government has said that this is something that they're looking into. They didn't say that it would pass or be brought into Parliament. They did say that they're looking into it because obviously we have a lot of people coming into the country, and the government's saying they need somewhere to go. The government hasn't spoken about maybe cutting down those people coming into the country for the moment, but they've told us that maybe a spare bedroom is the way to go. So I just can't help but giggle. But they're saying that it could ease the housing shortages that we have. They're saying it might reduce the pressure on the housing markets without building new stock. And it's probably, they're saying it's likely to be unpopular. I mean, I think that's a given. I think that's a given. And it penalises people for, having a room. What about if you want to have a wellbeing room or a study office or, spare room if you want to have a kid? I don't know.
It's just one of those, how do you even go about governing that? How do you go ensuring what is a spare room, what is an oversized, ensuite or walk-in wardrobe? It just opens the door for madness. It's obviously a ridiculous idea. Sometimes you wonder, are even real people on the other end of these decisions?
I find it I was reading it, I was thinking to myself, all these people that have, saved their 20% or, if they're buying owner occupied 20% or whatever the down payment that they've worked so hard to save that money to buy a home. Usually it's going to be more than 2 bedrooms if they've got family or kids, just for the government to come around and say, you're not using that room, let's tax it. So
well, ridiculous. I want to turn from that to something that I would like to think that one was never going to pass, but who knows in the world that we live in. But what is proposed that is potentially a bit more scary is this proposed tax on the family home, or removing some of those benefits that have existed. Now, there has been a lot of research on this. I have seen some articles produced on this suggesting that we have a very a tax system that really encourages people to have their wealth stored in their family home. It would be a good idea to remove out of that. I worry about this. First, I'd love you to explain a little bit more of where we are on that, but I really worry about it from the perspective of people like you just described, who've worked so hard on the assumption that this is going to be fine, that they can store their wealth there, and then it feels like a big rug pull if all of a sudden then that no longer exists. They didn't make the decision on that basis. It all seems like it's going to create a bit of a mess. Can you talk to us a bit more about that?
Yeah, it really, exactly what you said, Chris. It is basically they're wanting to remove the CGT, so capital gains exemption. So at the moment, obviously, you pay capital gains when you're selling an investment property, and at the moment, the owner-occupier properties are exempt from that. The government has said, look, we think that, we should take that exemption away. They want to obviously raise billions in revenue, and they want to treat a home like any other investment. So even if it's an owner occupier, even if you've saved for many, many years to obtain that property as your family home, the government is looking at it now at a different light and saying we need to look at a home as any other investment, and we might need to tax that as well. Primary residence. So it's quite a scary one, because you think of the Australian dream or the American dream. It's owning a home, having your family, being comfortable with your family in your home, in a good area. Having this sort of tax being put on everyday Australians is just wild to me. They have said it would be unpopular, so they do know that this one would be unpopular. But it's just, I think it's wild that they would even talk about that. They've also talked about, if they can't get the CGT removed, or the exemption removed, they're talking about having some sort of rental agreement with yourself as a homeowner, that you would basically use that. They would somehow come up with your like, let's say if you've owned your home fully and you don't have a mortgage on it, that expected rental income, the government's saying they could potentially tax.
Yeah, and
So,
that one, I mean, I get it's one of those things that economists do,
mm,
and that's speaking from being an economist, but it's one of those things that economists do where they have a theory that is just clearly not going to work out that way
mm,
in practice, because charging someone tax on the theoretical rent that they would have otherwise had, I mean, the idea would be long term that's going to discourage people from owning houses.
that's
But
right.
the reality is we all need a house. We all need somewhere to live. And I mean, even just the base concept of removing that capital gains tax exemption, when people go and sell their house, if they're paying a big chunk of tax on that gain, the difference between what they bought it for potentially many years ago and what they're selling it for,
Mm,
that that means that they really probably can't upgrade as much as they would have been able to do before. There's always unintended consequences when you go and implement some of these things, that particularly things that have been embedded in Australian society for many decades now. It's a pretty bold decision to make on any of them. And maybe it
mm.
does ultimately solve the housing crisis. But then you look at a country like Australia, do we even have really any reason to have a housing crisis? We've got plenty of land.
Yeah, yeah. It seems as though we have a crisis because we can't manage, we cannot manage um, the influxes and outfluxes. We can't manage what we are doing with the revenue that Australia has. It just seems like we have to keep taxing people. However, we do have a lot of revenue in Australia. We're a very resource rich country.
Hmm.
We're able to delegate the funds to certain areas. In my opinion, maybe they should be looking at doing that more, rather than putting the burden on everyday Australians that are working hard, paying their taxes, doing the right thing. This is just another burden that they don't need.
Let's look at another one that you brought to my attention. And this
Mm,
one is probably going to be slightly more popular, the idea
mm,
of a wealth tax. It potentially is more popular because I think the numbers you were saying to me were people with assets over 5 million potentially. I mean, you
hmm
can explain that a little bit more detail. But this idea of a wealth tax, I worry about from the perspective of, does it encourage that entrepreneurialism that
mm,
has built Australia the way it is?
yep,
If you can't, if it sort of caps people to saying, well, yeah, you can make a bit of money, but if you make too much money, we're going to then tax you on that as well. Does it really drive a lot of that entrepreneurial spirit really out of the country?
yeah, I agree. I definitely agree with that, because looking at the proposed tax. We're looking at about an annual tax of 2 to a bit percent on individuals with a net wealth above $5 million. It is excluding the family home and superannuation. And they're saying it could raise between $40 to $60 billion a year. Now, whilst it will raise that money, I fear what you have said, Chris, about the entrepreneurial side of things and business side of things. We need to have foundations in Australia where we can nurture people that want to go into business. We need to have things in place that encourage that, not take it away. So I believe this one would definitely discourage investment, innovation, like you said. It's also a risk of those people going overseas. I mean, we saw during the pandemic quite a lot of people that were either business people or everyday families, but there are a lot of people in business that actually didn't see the reason to stay in Australia as the government was sort of anti-business during that time. They were focused on other things. And we've seen that in Victoria. We've spoken about that extensively. But I just think this is going to drive people the other way.
I can't believe there's even more taxes we could talk about here, but you also brought up to me about the inheritance tax. And that's another one. I mean, I don't think that one will be particularly popular because I know a lot of people have strong opinions on that. But it is an area that I suppose you could argue a lot of people don't really get the benefit from, so maybe it is an easier one to get through. How do you, well, maybe you can give us a bit of an overview of that one as well, but how do you sort of rate the chances of something like that passing? Do you think it is going to get the pushback that some of those others might, particularly the family home one? I mean, I think that's going to get huge pushback.
I think if anything, the inherited tax would be the most likely one to actually get put through to Parliament as an act and then potentially pass as legislation. The reason being is because we did have inheritance tax back in the 1970s, and it wasn't popular, and it was something that a lot of people discussed heavily during that time, and there was obviously a lot of wealth transfer, and now we're seeing generation. In the next couple of years, there's going to be a lot more wealth that has been transferred and will be transferred as a result of our property prices and everything that's going on in our country. I think it's definitely one that could be passed, but I think it will hurt people. It will definitely hinder, a lot of growth. And as a country, we need to be focusing on forward movement and growth. If we are putting taxes and burdens on everyone and everything, it just defeats, it's really defeating for businesses, individuals. I'm thinking of people also that have family business. So, that they would have things that are passed down, or they would like to pass down property or things like that. These are all people that are going to get caught up in this inheritance tax. And, it could be really devastating for some people, which I think it will be. And it might also encourage people to look at setting up different structures, trusts and companies and things like that.
Yeah, and that probably brings me to the last question to wrap all this up. Look, you've mentioned so many different angles, from the outright absurd to taxing the spare bedroom, through to inheritance taxes, which they've, like you said, we've had before, weren't popular, but they could come back. Ultimately, how do you view who is most affected by this? Because you said something just there that's caught my attention about setting up companies, setting up trusts. Really, people who know what they're doing will always find ways to take advantage of changes to the system to protect their wealth. That's generally what happens. Is it going to be in this situation with these proposals that the people who are most impacted and most hurt are ultimately the everyday Australians? They're not necessarily the rich end of town. Like, it is always nice to think, oh, well, the property owners and the people who are inheriting lots of money, or the people who have lots of spare bedrooms, apparently, they're all the rich end of town. They should be paying more. But that's not usually how it works out, is it?
Yeah, I agree, because this we're talking about the wealth tax, obviously 5 million in net worth and over. Is that personal name? If you're a property investor, you probably have your property in a trust, maybe, or if buying through a company. So there's different ways of people setting up their wealth so that they can preserve it long term. I think this one would, these proposed tax measures would ultimately hurt the everyday Australian. The everyday Australian is trying to save to buy a home. They might not be thinking about all these different asset classes, because some people's goal is purely to buy a home. They want to protect themselves and their kids, and they just want that safe space. And that's ultimately who this is going to affect, in my personal opinion. I also am concerned deeply about the vagueness and lack of clarity when they're talking about proposed bills to go into Parliament and acts and legislation. The reason being is it's just, when does it stop? So the goalposts keep moving for everyone. And I don't understand, or I don't like, I want to understand, sorry, but I don't like the fact that we have sort of, they're talking about a full number. So nothing's indexed. And that's what I'm also confused about, because we know with inflation that things can change rapidly. And we've also talked about the superannuation tax, and how $3 million today might sound like a lot, but in 30 years' time, it's probably not going to be that much. So things like that, I'm quite concerned about. And also, it just creates fear among people, and a lot of uncertainty about what to invest in, where can I invest, what should I do. And people that are retired, they want to enjoy their life. They've worked, they've paid their tax. Um, they just want to enjoy what they have. So with the government coming after them, it's just another reason for them to, obviously, some of them move overseas.
Yeah, look, it's been an absolutely fascinating discussion. I think I'm about to lose a bedroom and get a much bigger walk-in wardrobe. But look, really always appreciate your deep dive into these topics, and looking in to these aspects that really do affect people. So we do appreciate your work on that. Thank you, Katrina.
Thanks for having me, Chris. Thanks.
Thanks everyone for watching. We'll chat again soon.